Hi, welcome back to lesson 2. So this time we're going to continue in phase by looking at data collection. Before we start, here's some questions just to do as a warm-up. Now some of the areas you may not know, and that's absolutely fine, but it's just a test to see what you do remember and what you may need to work on. We will be covering all of these questions over the next couple of lessons. Right, so pause now and just work through those examples. Welcome back. Hopefully you got those answers. If not, maybe just try again later, or maybe even go back and try again when we've done the lessons. All of these starters that I've chosen will be exam questions, and I'm just getting you used to the type of questions that you will face. So today we're going to look at data collection. Again, you really want to be looking at the light blue when I give you the questions. Hopefully over the next few lessons you will start working into the darker blue, and that's a really nice comfortable position to sit. And as always, if you go to purple, probably start looking at the higher base lessons, and that might be something you want to push to later. And remember, I will be asking at all stage. If you're a red, you need to redo it. Amber, maybe go through a couple more questions. Or green, you want to carry on to the next lesson, well, the next part. So the first part is we want to be able to understand and handle statistics. Statistics is classed as lies, damn lies, and statistics. The really important thing about learning statistics is the fact that it can be written or used to say a lot of things that may not be accurately correct. So it's good to have an understanding. So when somebody says the average, most people think we're talking about the mean. However, average can also mean mode or median, which we'll discuss in a minute. Okay, the data handling cycle. So, a common belief is that you can prove anything with statistics. Statistics do play a key role in the development of our society, and if you look at any newspapers or even news articles or anything like that, statistics is often used. For example, with this coronavirus, we've been told everything from the death rate's 0.1% to 1% to 10%. So have a look at those statistics and just see what you think. Now, the data handling cycle is when you're wanting to research something to prove or disprove it. We have to go through what we call a data handling cycle. First thing you do is you pose a question. Now, let's say we want to look at, do children drink too much Coke? Okay, that is a question. You may want to look in how much Coke children are drinking. But you have to state it as a hypothesis, which means you make a statement. So, in 2020, children are drinking too much Coke. Now, this can either be proved or disproved. After you've got your question, you then need to decide what data you need to collect and how. I mean, for example, are we going to go of how much Coke is sold in shops? But then that could be adults and children. Are we going to ask our close friends? But then that would be biased because our friends may think like us. Or are we going to basically find, say, research from how much Coke is sold in school? You have to really think how you're going to collect your data, as that will affect the rest of the research. You then usually have to do questionnaires, collect data by how many Coke bottles are sold, etc., etc. By the way, people who have also done research later on, say at university, and you are doing research yourself, this is the type of questions you will be asking. So this data handling cycle is useful for a lot of areas, especially if you want to go to university. And finally, after you've got your data, you want to interpret the results. So what do the results actually show you? And then you evaluate the results and you look back at your hypothesis, your question, and say, have I answered what I set out to answer? Learn this off. So pose a question, decide what data and how you're going to collect it, organize the data, interpret the results. This is the type of thing you need to learn. It will be asked on exams. So, there's different ways that we can collect data. The first one is primary data. Now, this is really good because it's data that you collect yourself. So from those people around you, maybe going to shops, maybe going to schools. Now right now I just want you to pause and I want you to think of a positive and a negative that may be based around collecting primary data. So pause now. Okay, welcome back. Now, one of the good things about primary data is you've collected it yourself, so you know it's accurate. You know the data you've collected will answer the question that you've posed. The problem with it is, as I said before about the Coke, you may just ask your friends, and that is a biased group because a lot of your friends will probably think the same as you. So is it really a good representation of the whole world? So the second data you can collect is secondary data. Secondary data is collected by somebody else. So for example, information that's in papers, the information of the coronavirus that's currently being collected. Whilst that data is still good to look at, you didn't collect it yourself. So you can ask, how truthful is this? Are people really giving us the correct data? Is the data being changed or made to look better or made to look worse? Okay, and remember that whichever way you collect the data, it is in the 4-part cycle. So I'm going to go over those again, but I just want you to pause and see how much of it you actually remember yourself. So pause now and write down the 4 parts of the data handling cycle. Okay, welcome back. And as we did, we pose the question, we collect the data, we organise the data, and we interpret the results. So the way to remember this is PCOI. So you go PCOI. It's a really good way to remember the information. Remember in acronyms, in songs, and in dance. Normally I would sing and dance, but I think that might be a little bit embarrassing here. So when you do this, write down PCOI and remember, pose the question, collect the data, organize the data, interpret the results. Okay, bit of an example of a question, and I would just like you to have a look of how you would use PCOI. So a gardener grows tomatoes both in the greenhouse and outside, and he wants to investigate the following hypothesis. Tomato plants grown inside the greenhouse produce more tomatoes than those grown outside. Do you see how I've made a statement? So that is posing the question. I would like you to pause now and work through the PCOI and see how you'd collect the data for these tomatoes. Pause now. Okay, welcome back. So the first thing you do is pose the question. Now my thing is I've slightly changed the question by saying I'm looking at 10 tomato plants grown in the greenhouse and 10 tomato plants grown outside, and I want to see which one produces the most tomatoes. I collect the data. Basically, I'll say I'm going to collect the tomatoes between June and September, and I'm going to count how many tomatoes I collect from those in the greenhouse and how many tomatoes I collect from those outside. And also, when we're collecting the tomatoes, I'm also saying those fit for purpose. So if the little tiny green things that aren't developing, it's not fit for purpose. Or if they're basically don't develop right or any other things, they're not fit for purpose. Finally, I'll organise and analyse the data by looking at the mean number of tomatoes grown inside, the mean number of tomatoes grown outside, and finally I'll interpret the data, probably showing it in a graph because it looks good, and I'll give my conclusion, what was correct. Okay, this is the data handling cycle. I'm going to list off a number of different hypotheses, and I just want you to go through the cycle, the PCOI, and just talk through what you would do in each case. So, Questions I've come up with is August the hottest month of the year? Boys are better than girls at estimating distances, etc, etc. Now, you can also develop your own hypothesis to test and use a dating handling cycle then. So pause now and try and go through maybe 2 of those questions. Okay, welcome back. I'll talk through the first one as this will give you a good example. So P, I'm posing the question, August is the hottest month of the year. So C, how will I collect the data? Well, I think this would be secondary data, because what I would probably do is I would look at the weather forecasts for different areas throughout the UK and just write down the temperatures for August compared to June, July and even September. So O, organise the data. I would put this in a graph, comparing it to each other to see whether August was the hottest or whether we were shown that June, July or even September was even hotter. And finally, PCOI, I'd interpret the data. I'll basically use this to say, was I right, was I wrong? Hopefully you had similar type answers. If not, go back and try again. So this is the first for data handling, basically collecting the data. Are you red, amber or green?